Good afternoon. Welcome to our final session of the 2022 DMHA Cultural and Linguistic Competency Conference. Our final session will be Connecting the Path from War-Related Trauma to Culturally Competent Services for Refugees, Asylees, and Asylum Seekers. Our presenters will be Danielle Schneider-Morin, Craig Anisu Chigadza, and Claire Pollock, all of Exodus Refugee Immigration. Danielle Schneider-Morin joined the staff of Exodus in 2019. As a bilingual mental wellness coordinator, Danielle manages the mental wellness program by providing individual, family, and group counseling. Danielle meets with clients in the office, at their homes, or via telehealth to break down those barriers to mental health services. She also provides psychoeducation to both clients and Exodus teammates to bridge the gap in understanding the impact of trauma. Danielle holds a licensure in mental health counseling, and she is a national certified counselor. Next is Craig Anisu Chigadza. He was born and raised in Zimbabwe and joined Exodus in June 2021 after previously serving as an intern at Exodus during his time as an undergraduate. As the mental wellness advocate, Craig is directly responsible for external partner relations in the mental wellness department and focuses his efforts on increasing provider capacity to serve clients through culturally and linguistically appropriate means. In addition, he also provides direct support to clients enrolled in the mental wellness program that need short-term case management. Craig is a passionate young leader who strives in and outside of work to make Indianapolis a more culturally inclusive city. And finally, we have Claire Pollock. Claire is a licensed clinical social worker. She worked at Exodus from 2015 to 2018, first as a case manager and then as the youth program coordinator. She received her Master of Social Work in 2019 and worked as a school social worker at an elementary school for 2.5 years. In 2021, Claire returned to Exodus as a mental wellness community trainer. Your handouts for this session can be found on the right-hand side panel of your screen under handouts. Please stay for our Q&A with Danielle, Craig Anisu, and Claire at the end of the presentation, as well as our closing. Thank you, and I will turn it over to you three.
Well, thank you, Kristen. We are so happy to be here and share this last session with everyone. If you can please go to the next slide. Okay, we are going to be talking about connecting the path from war-related trauma to culturally competent services for refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers. Next slide, please. So first, I want you to put yourself in my shoes. I am an Afghan refugee. I woke up today living in Kabul, getting my children ready for school. I heard on the news that the US might be leaving Afghanistan. I know what it was like when the Taliban ran the country before. My husband, who's now deceased, used to work for the US government. And I hear in the news that my 3-year-old daughter is now blocked. I can't get to her. The Taliban has blocked the road. And we have to leave now or we may not be able to get out of the country. I grab my 2 children. I walk to the airport. It's crowded. I beg and plead with people who don't understand my language, telling them that I have to get out with all hundreds of other people trying to get on a plane. I wait hours in a crowded airport. Finally, we get on a plane. I don't know where we're going, but I know we're leaving. This morning, I didn't think we were leaving. We arrive in Qatar. We're now in a military base in Qatar. We don't know how long we're going to be here and when we'll be resettled in the US. What seems like forever, maybe it was a couple of weeks. I know I'm on a plane now to Indianapolis. I couldn't pick Indianapolis out on a map. We arrived to the airport. I'm greeted by an Exodus refugee immigration employee and a Dari interpreter who welcome me, tell me they're happy I'm here, tell me they're going to help me get resettled in the US. They take me to my new home. And then over the next couple of weeks, Exodus teaches me about cultural orientation, the differences between what life is like in the US. They help me with employment. They help me learn that I could take English classes because I've never had the opportunity to go to school. I can't read or write in Dari. And I was told when I was at the base in Qatar that it would be a couple of weeks. I'd fill out some paperwork in the US and I'd have my daughter here in the US. I have my legal intake with a lawyer at Exodus, and I find out that it's going to be, if at all, 3 to 5 years before I'll ever see my daughter again. And I'm distraught. I can't sleep. My 15-year-old son is now my interpreter. He is also the man of the house. He's taking on responsibilities that 6 months ago he had no idea that he would ever be taking on. And so I tell you this story because these are the clients that are here with us. These are the people who are sitting in front of you, whether you're at a community mental health, whether you're at Exodus Refugee, and this is the baggage that they come with. Next slide, please. So today we're going to talk about to better understand the role Exodus plays in our community and as a resettlement agency, and how this mission extends to other community service providers. To understand how Exodus staff apply DEI and cultural competence to ensure clients are supported and connected with community partners. Also to understand the challenges and explore solutions for broader and effective service implementation, especially for mental health services. Next slide. So my name is Danielle Schneider-Moran. You've already heard a little bit about me. I am the mental wellness coordinator at Exodus, and together we provide services for people of over 30 different countries in 24 different languages in the last 3 years.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Anesu-Chigadza, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I serve as the mental wellness advocate at Exodus Refugee Immigration, and my job is making sure that our clients are able to navigate the systems of accessing mental health services in Indianapolis a little easier. So it's an absolute pleasure to be able to share a part of the work that we do with you this afternoon.
Thank you. And I'm Claire Pollock. I'm the mental wellness community trainer at Exodus. So I do a lot of the preventative work, which is really great. But we're going to take a minute now. If you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about our mental wellness program at Exodus. So as Danielle mentioned, we have a lot of different programs and services provided through Exodus. But today our focus is going to be on the mental wellness program. So a big part of Danielle's job is providing individual and family therapy sessions. I do provide individual sessions. I primarily work with youth. Danielle oversees all of the mental wellness, and she has a full caseload. So she works with our clients, and then our direct supervisor, she also sees a couple clients as well. But the services we provide to our clients, we provide in-person, home-based, or office-based therapy sessions, and then we also do provide telehealth services. So with the pandemic came a shift of services, and we were doing all telehealth services, but now we've been trying to kind of get back to providing in-person services. However, for some of our clients, it's easier or more convenient to do telehealth. So we still do provide those for clients that wish to receive services that way. And one thing that I want to mention when I am talking about clients, something just to keep in mind. So with our mental wellness program, we only serve clients that are ours, that are enrolled in services at Exodus. So that's someone that has legal status or eligibility for legal status, which we'll talk about a little bit more in these next couple slides. But just being aware that our mental wellness program is specific for clients of ours. We also do have group and modalities. So we collaborate with our youth program, our women's program, and our elders program, as well as also IUPUI's Heron School of Art Therapy program. We've done different group projects with all these different programs. A couple examples where we did a return to school during the pandemic with the youth group. We've done an introduction to art therapy, an elderly support group, and we've also just done introduction to mental wellness and general mental health education groups. And then also partnering with the women's program, we've been able to do a weaving and craft group for Congolese refugees, and then also a cognitive processing therapy group for cognitive refugees. In addition to therapy and groups, we also do refer clients to providers because that is one of our main objectives, is to get clients to be self-sufficient and culturally integrated into the community. So our goal is that we can connect clients to culturally and linguistically appropriate services within the community. And that's a big part of what Craig does in his role, is working on building relationships with community partners. And then we also do community outreach. So we educate local agencies on how to provide culturally and linguistically appropriate mental health services for refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers when appropriate. And then we also just have some other variety of mental wellness activities and services, like women's health programming, domestic violence awareness, and parenting in the United States culture. And then also, thanks to DMHA, we now are, actually the three of us are all mental health first aid instructors. But so that's a primary part of my role, is I do provide mental health first aid to our staff. We are in the process of training all of our staff in that, and then also working with community partners to educate the community on mental health first aid and signs and symptoms to look for. Next slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire. So moving forward for the next couple of minutes, we're going to spend a little bit of time breaking down the individuals that we serve and some of the terms that we often hear being used to describe the populations that we serve. So first, who is a refugee? Often the term refugee is used for anyone that has escaped war and has arrived in a particular country, but there are actually some form of definitions and barriers that have to be broken down for someone to be able to get to the status of being a refugee. So first, a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her home country due to persecution, violence, or anything that causes a fear of their existence. And a refugee has to have a well-founded fear, so something that is documented, something that can be presented often as a legal document to show that there is some form of reason that is either racial, religious, based on nationality or political opinion, or subscribing to a particular social group within a given country. Often refugees cannot return to their home countries because this threat continues to exist throughout their lives. And we must also mention that the refugee process can take anywhere from 2 months up to 40 years. Often refugees have to go and live in a secondary country, where we often hear the term refugee camps. This is where they're waiting being relocated to a country where they will gain permanent residence for the coming years. So just keeping that in mind, that the refugee process is a very long and drawn out process that goes through many security checks, many applications, many legal documents, often many interviews that may sometimes re-traumatize because they have to tell their story over and over again. So I think it's just important for us to keep that in mind as we serve these individuals and as we get to know what their journeys are like. Next slide, please. So next we've got who is an asylee. This is often another group of individuals or populations of humanitarian concern that is sometimes just called a refugee. But an asylee is someone or a person who has been granted asylum. This means that they've been authorized to work in the United States. They're able to get a social security card. They may even request permission to travel overseas, often not being able to go back to their home country because, like we mentioned again, there's also that well-founded fear. Asylees, or someone who has been granted asylum, arrives in the United States with a visa or some form of status and then mentions at the port of entry that I am no longer safe and I cannot go back to my country, and they have to state their case. And after that has gone through another vetting process, has gone through sometimes court proceedings, immigration court proceedings, they're granted asylum. After 1 year of being granted the asylum status, they're able to apply to become a permanent resident. Again, this is not just permanent residency being granted to them. They have to go through applying again, restating their story, showing that there's a well-founded reason why they cannot go back to their home country. That is often known as the green card stage. And then after an individual becomes a permanent resident, after 4 years, then they become eligible to apply for citizenship. Often this is very difficult because they still have to prove that their permanent residency was in good faith. They still have to go through the application process. It costs a lot of money, and there's also a very drawn out process to just understanding that is what an asylee is someone who has been granted asylum in the United States. Next slide, please. So next we're going to talk about who's an asylum seeker. So there's a very big difference. We talked about an asylee as someone who has been granted asylum. Now, an asylum seeker is someone who is seeking asylum. An asylum seeker is a person who leaves their home country and arrives at a port of entry. So if they arrive through an airport or through a land border, and then they state immediately that I do not have the documentation that allows me to enter the United States via some form of status. However, I am in danger from my home country, hence I am here to seek asylum. This is usually through, again, war, violence, persecution, taking away of human rights, and anything that can be legally recognized as an issue that is well-founded for one to seek refuge. Once someone is registered as an asylum seeker, again, they're often brought into the country and are often put in immigration detention as their case is being reviewed, and again, looking for that well-founded fear as to why someone has arrived in the United States and seeking asylum. So we just thought it's really important for us to break down those three demographics, and also keeping in mind that there's so many other different ways and clients that we serve, but these are the three most dominant. And I think it's also important for us to note that as we talk about refugees, often refugees, the term refugees is associated with individuals of a darker skin shade and a darker skin tone, but it's extremely important to recognize that a refugee crisis can erupt at any moment and in any country. A country that's in peace today could be in a refugee conflict tomorrow. So it's always something that we should keep in mind as we go through us providing services to these individuals and just leading with grace. Next slide, please. So Exodus has over the years served so many clients from so many different countries. And as you can see on this slide, these are just some of the countries that we have served since we started. And the ones that are on the teal like color are the ones that are we'll consider recent arrivals, so about 2020, 2021 until this day. And these are, we can name a few that I'm sure some of you have heard: individuals that are coming in from Afghanistan, individuals that have come in from Burma, individuals coming in from the Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Eritrea, Ethiopia. And often if you look at these recent arrivals, are individuals that are coming from countries that have been in conflict in the last 10 to 20 years. And that can just show you how long and how drawn out that process for individuals to arrive in the United States as a refugee can take. A conflict that happened 10 years ago may only see someone arriving in the United States today. Next slide, please. So we've also served clients from other countries. We've served clients from countries like Brazil, Angola, Chad, Cameroon, and these will come in through other pathways that I mentioned briefly. And Exodus would always be happy to engage with you further to explore some of these other pathways that individuals take when they arrive into the United States. So I'm going to hand it over to Danielle to speak a little bit about some of the languages that she has encountered in her service.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. So you can see here listed, these are the languages that we've worked within in the last 3 years. And with these languages, a lot of times I provide services in English and Spanish without an interpreter. We use an interpreter for the rest, and we partner with Luna Language Services for many of our interpreters. And sometimes when I call and ask for a Lingala interpreter or a Tigrinya interpreter, the person making the appointment has never heard of the language. So making sure we know that even within, we talk about Afghan refugees, there are 3 languages that we've encountered of refugees from Afghan speaking, and making sure when you're working with clients, you're getting the right one. Because Dari, a lot of times they say, oh, you can use a Farsi interpreter, but I've learned that clients do not understand Farsi. I've had people go to doctor's appointments and not understand anything about their pregnancy because someone was using a Farsi interpreter instead of a Dari interpreter. So making sure not only are we getting culturally appropriate interpreters, but also we're getting the correct language and confirming that the clients understand, because you have British English, you have Scottish English, and not all sound the same. So clients might not be able to see there's different terminology and different words. So it's really important to make sure that clients have the ability to understand and that we're providing culturally appropriate interpreters. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to help understanding culturally and linguistically appropriate mental health services through case studies. We're going to share with you 3 case studies. We have changed the names for the clients and some of the details to keep their confidentiality. Next slide, please. Craig.
Great, thank you. So like Danielle mentioned, we thought it would be wonderful for us to engage with the work and connect these pathways from war-related trauma to culturally competent services by actually speaking about the realities that some of these clients are facing. So first, we're going to start by sharing a little bit about Maria. And again, we want to acknowledge the bravery of these individuals, the things that they've gone through, what they have experienced is something that we cannot imagine. And we always want to say we don't own these stories. We're simply advocates for these stories, and we always want to return the power to the individuals with these lived experiences. So first, understanding Maria. Maria is a female identifying client from Central America, arrived in the United States between 2020 and 2021, right at the height of COVID, is in her early 30s, single, no children, also no family anywhere in the United States. Spanish speaking, speaks fluent Spanish, however, has a limited command of English, is able to understand English, but is not able to navigate a full conversation in English. Does have college level education in her home country and worked a really impactful job in her home country, but unfortunately had to escape due to a well-founded fear. She also has a limited knowledge of mental health services. So again, looking at the background of where she's coming from, what she had to go through, and then arriving in the United States where these services and service providers like yourselves are available, and her not knowing how to navigate the system. And then there was also a lack of experience with navigating the healthcare system in the United States. Now, I think I speak for most of us when I say, for us, the healthcare system is still very complex, and we have to take a couple of tries to get it right. Now imagine for our clients that are navigating trauma, that are navigating acclimatizing to a new country, to a new environment, how much more difficult that situation can become. So next we're going to break down some situations and look at some of the barriers and symptoms that Maria was suffering. So when Maria arrived and was started being seen at Exodus, she explained that she was having unexplained body aches, so was constantly in pain and sometimes could not tell where the pain was coming from, and inability to concentrate in English class, which is one of the wonderful services that we provide to our clients. They're able to get into English class free of charge, and she was really struggling. Despite her wanting to be in there, she was just struggling to concentrate and to make the best of that opportunity. She also mentioned that she was having constant racing thoughts and an inability to sleep. Now you can imagine how that can exacerbate some of those symptoms and how a person is feeling if they're constantly thinking about what is happening back home, constantly unable to sleep. And sometimes when she was able to sleep, this turned into waking up from nightmares that she was not able to recall. So you can imagine that added stress of where sometimes you'd hope that going to sleep is going to give you at least a couple of hours of calm, but that doesn't happen again. There was often loud noises that were causing a fear reaction. Again, taking into account that most of our clients have experienced trauma, multiple traumas along the way, from escaping their home country, maybe into second or third country, arriving in the United States, sometimes being in detention, being put in front of a judge for the first time. All those things were building trauma, and also after having to sleep outside in Mexico before arriving in the United States, there was a lot of noise and fear associated with that. So once he was here again, noise was serving as a trigger, unfortunately. Like we mentioned, Maria does not have family in the United States, so there was often sadness, loneliness that was quickly turning into depression. And even though she's Spanish speaking, the local community was not individuals she could trust due to having experienced other traumas, like I mentioned, along her journey, and she didn't feel that she could trust anyone, even though there was that relation of speaking the same language. Next slide, please. So I mentioned briefly the barriers of navigating the healthcare system. That is only just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many barriers that our clients are facing on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to talk for the next few minutes over some of the barriers that Maria experienced. So financial difficulties, having to escape your home country and arriving in the United States, and then having to figure out where to work, how much you need to work to be able to support your own life, being a single individual household, and not being able to make enough money where she could get health insurance, she could get all the other benefits that maybe somebody who's working a comfortable job would be able to get. So Maria really struggled with this, and this was a very big barrier. She was earning a paycheck, but could not afford for anybody to deduct insurance or any sort of benefit from it. And hence, when she started to experience physical symptoms that needed medical attention was not insured with any provider, and we will talk a little bit about that later. Again, we often see provider discomfort, and I think for Maria this was something that really stood out in the lack of experience in serving populations of humanitarian concern. So we hope that conferences like this can put more confidence in providers that are doing really good work to be able to adapt to serving individuals that come from different places, look different, speak different languages, and just making sure that there's that equitable service. So this was one of the biggest challenges that Maria was facing, that the providers she was facing were not able to provide interpretation for her, were not able to understand where she's coming from, were not able to understand her immigration status and all those things. And that is where Exodus comes in, and they provide advocates that can help our clients break down some of those barriers. And that turns into, again, like I mentioned, provider reluctance to use interpreters due to a lack of knowledge. That is something that we continue to see on a day-to-day basis, and we have to advocate for our clients to make sure that they're able to get those services. And then there were administrative obstacles. Again, this is something that I think all of us face on a day-to-day basis, right? So making sure that you fill in prior paperwork, getting a phone assessment, somebody who's speaking in English and not being able to respond to that, and that being considered a no call. The client didn't pick up and then cut out of services immediately, and then a lack of knowledge in navigating the United States healthcare system is something that really stood out. And infrastructure, again, we mentioned that insurance, job schedules, having to work really late hours or really early hours and not being able to make appointments, and having to almost compromise between things that are really life and death. If you look at it genuinely, she needs money to survive, but also need the medical care to be able to continue to go back to work. So navigating those circumstances became really difficult, and that ultimately became a lack of stability, where one day able to attend a doctor's appointment or a therapist's appointment, and then the next day going to work and missing the other, and that created a lot of misunderstanding with service providers. And then a fear of stigma and community gossip. Again, well-founded fear from the journey, not knowing who to trust in the community, not knowing who is going to be there to serve as a resource or is going to be working against you. A fear of speaking English, that I think is something that often people would not understand or not be able to comprehend, but that really made it very difficult for her to advocate for herself in moments where she needed to. And then limited mental health providers offering culturally and trauma-informed services. And I'll mention this again, we're hoping that conferences like this can help us break down those stigmas, can help us equip our providers in the community to be able to take on these challenges and provide those services. Next slide, please. So, interventions. We are in the business of making sure that people are self-sufficient. We understand the symptoms, we understand the barriers, but we are there to break down those barriers and make sure that each client that we serve is able to get to a point of self-sufficiency. They're able to get to tell their own story and say, I am able to do this by myself. And that is what brings us satisfaction and joy, and which is why we keep going to work on a daily basis to make sure these things happen. So what are some of these interventions that we took? So our therapists do a really good job, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR. We also did a referral to the Crisis Intervention Center, where unfortunately, because of some of those barriers that we talked about in the last slide, the client was turned away. However, she'll still billed. Unfortunate. And I think this happens to a lot of people. Her is still being billed, again, added trauma because there was this bill that was coming in and she never received the service, where Exodus will step in and try to help. But oftentimes is anxiety inducing for a client who's already struggling financially to have to navigate, these challenges. And then we also referred her to a community mental health center. We continue to advocate for housing. Like we mentioned before, there was a fear of noise, and the housing that she was in at the moment was right next to a main road, and there was traffic 24 hours a day, and that was disrupting her sleep. So making sure that we would go in and advocate with an apartment complex with our housing to move her to housing that is safer for her and can allow her to rest at night, and then continue to advocate for financial assistance due to lack of insurance. So this was taking a look at what programs are out there in the community, where can she be enrolled to be able to get that, and we're happy to report that Maria currently does have services, is insured, and continues to be seen. And then providing case management, getting her to a primary care physician, making sure that she continues to be supported in terms of employment, and then advocating for those bills and walking the client through the process of advocating to get some of those bills taken away, to put them in a place where they can really feel stable to take on life in a way that all of us desire. Next slide, please. So one thing that you always hear us say at Exodus is our clients are resilient. They are resilient individuals. After years of trauma, after years of obstacles, not understanding the system, they still manage to rise to be top contributors in our community. They add to the fabric of our community, which is why we always want to celebrate their current existence, where they are and what they are doing. And I'm happy to report that Maria is doing really, really well and has been able to take on some of the help that we are giving her, and has begun to receive mental health services with the community mental health center that is just 2 minutes away from our house, so the transportation barrier is taken away. And any of those other challenges, the insurance is covering it, and she's having to pay a really, really low premium. And this is also a moment to say thank you to our community mental health providers and community partners that are engaging with us and making this possible, because it is a collaboration. She's, again, as a result of these collaborations, is currently receiving anxiety medication, which is reducing symptoms and improving her quality of sleep, improving her ability to go to work and stay on the job. And she's even gone ahead and started her own company, which is amazing. We talked about that resiliency, right? So just looking at that path and that connection where we've got a war-related trauma to individuals that are really getting connected to culturally competent services and being able to take on life in the community, and is currently managing her own appointments, seeing a psychiatrist on her own, has secure housing, and continues to advocate for herself and communicates. She now knows how to say, I need an interpreter. I need someone to help me with this. Can I have a printed document? Can I have proof that this is going to be coming in the mail? So we always celebrate these stories because they really show the impact of that connection, that even though someone is coming from a background of trauma, that doesn't identify them. It gives them an opportunity to really rewrite and retell their story. And that is only possible when we have those culturally and linguistically appropriate services. Next slide, please.
All right, well, thank you, Craig, for educating us and providing some information about Maria. Our next case study, I'm gonna talk about groups. So I mentioned that was one of the services provided through our mental wellness program. So recently we did an introduction to mental wellness group and then an art therapy group. So these were actually 2 different groups. It was the same individuals invited to both of them, but it was on 2 separate days. So just some demographics. Female identifying clients from Afghanistan. We had both Dari and Uzbek speakers at this group. The individuals there were about early 20s to mid 30s. Some of them were married, some of them others were single mothers, and most recently they'd arrived within 6 months to the past year. And some of the participants had college education and some had never had the opportunity to attend school. So just when forming a group and thinking about different barriers that came along with this group, first is just the lack of mental health education. So obviously that was one of the main reasons why we did this group, is just an introduction to mental health. But clients, a lot of clients that we serve have never had the access to receive education just regarding mental health in general. There are also various levels of literacy skills and English language ability. Transportation was also a barrier. So our first, the introduction to mental wellness group was actually done remotely. It was done virtually because one of the big barriers was transportation for that. But we really wanted to have the opportunity to bring these individuals together and participate in the same room. So we did provide, or we were able to do our second one in person. However, transportation was still a barrier, as we could only transport so many different clients, and some of our clients don't feel safe using Ubers. And then also lack of childcare. So a lot of the individuals that we invited to this group are caregivers, and maybe their spouses are at work during the day, and they have older children that go to school, but they still have their younger children to care for. So they were unable to attend because of that. And then some other people weren't able to attend just because of their work hours. So we've seen some individuals recently gain employment, but some of their shifts are the more traditional first shift work schedule. So they were working third shift and unable to attend this group. And then also with technology. So as I mentioned, our first group we did was virtual. And so we did have some difficulties getting clients connected to that. And also just with reliable connection throughout our whole group session. And then also just a fear of stigma or community gossip. Like I mentioned before, a lot of individuals might not have any lack of, or they might not have education surrounding mental health. And so there is just that fear of the stigma or what they do know about it. It can be considered, they can have negative connotations regarding it. Also, sorry, one other thing that I wanted to mention with the barrier. So we try to be trauma informed in the practices that we provide. And when we, in these groups, when we provide PowerPoints, we try to incorporate pictures of individuals that look like the individuals participating in our group. However, in one of our groups we had an individual in that PowerPoint that we had just found, like we had just gotten through a Google search, and it actually triggered some emotions in our interpreter as it kind of brought him back because he actually knew that individual. So just being aware that there can be trauma related to what we are just simply as pictures. So trying our best to make sure that we are practicing best practices with that. And even sometimes when we do, it might still trigger some of those reactions. So being proactive in that and having those conversations. So the intervention that we used was, we did this women's group. And so like I said, we did this introduction to mental wellness group, and then we did an art therapy group. And we noticed as we were presenting the materials, they didn't talk a whole lot during the presentations, or like they wouldn't say how they were feeling, but you could tell by the end, just with their body language and their gratitude, how much they appreciated having this opportunity to participate in a group like this. We end all of our groups with a reflection, and it allows us to really see what the clients are enjoying from the groups, maybe things to change, and future groups that they might want to participate in. So the main focus for this was this women's group. However, earlier in the year, we also did a group with males that spoke Dari, and we've noticed that a lot of the individuals that we worked with in that group have more of that military background, whether having served in the military or been involved in it in some different capacity. So we noticed a lot more of like post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. But one thing that we thought was really interesting, just kind of keeping you guys aware of some of these situations that individuals sitting in front of us have experienced. As you know, my name is Claire, and when we went to introduce ourselves, the individual, when he heard Claire, he heard clear, because he used to work as a bomb inspector, and so they would say clear when it was okay for individual, when the area and the site was clear. So just thinking, just kind of keeping that in mind, that is the background that some individuals could have some of these lived experiences. Also, just educating interpreters on the needs for group intervention. So we provide interpretation, like I mentioned, but just meeting with our interpreter prior to starting the group in order to educate them on some of the different nuances that come with working in a group, because they need to be able, if you have multiple people talking, they need to make sure that they're hearing what they're saying, and then that we are also hearing that. Slide, please. And I just want to end this one with just talking about our outcomes or successes with this. When working with the clients that we work with, we really have to be flexible. And it was just amazing to see how flexible and resilient, like Craig mentioned, the clients were. We had to do a last minute change in regards to interpretation and doing it on virtually versus Zoom, in person. And the clients just took it with stride and they went right along with it, and they were very appreciative and grateful for that opportunity. And one of the biggest things that one of the most positive things that came out of this is that clients were from different areas and different parts of Indianapolis were able to come together and get to know one another, and then just build relationships and be able to communicate through art and learning that art can bring people together. And it was just also very eye-opening because it seemed like it kind of took a lot of the individuals back to like when they were a child, and they just seemed very relaxed and they were very determined in this origami box that we were building, and just a lot of positive attitudes and appreciation for offering these groups.
Okay, that brings us to our third case study, and this gentleman is a Burmese male in his 30s, single, Burmese speaking, of Muslim faith, has a high school education, was a refugee in Malaysia, and in Malaysia learned that when he was far from his family, the way to make friends and to deal with some of that sadness was to drink alcohol, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coping skill. Limited knowledge of mental health services prior to arriving in the US. He's been in the US about 5 years. Just difficulty due to language, navigating health systems in the US. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this client had explained unexplained body pains, back pain, neck pain, stomach, inability to concentrate, poor short-term memory, would explain, hey, you get to the doctor, you do this, and then the next thing be like, I don't know how to get to the doctor. Racing thoughts, describing it as watching a movie in his head and can't stop thinking about unemployment, how am I going to get money, how am I going to support my family and my child and my ex-wife back home. Struggling with substance abuse, suicidal ideation, which increased with the substance use, sadness, depression due to loneliness and just being far away, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, as well as a loneliness due to a lack of trust with the community. It's important to recognize we do have a large Burmese community in Indianapolis on the south side of the city, but not all Burmese you can lump into one. You have Burmese, you have Chin, you have different religions, and just because people speak the same language or they're considered Burmese does not mean that they trust each other. They may have been persecuted by each other in some way, shape, or form, that they will all come together. Next slide, please. So as you can just look, you can see this huge list of barriers, and some of them shared with Maria, our previous client. For him, this client is no long-term substance abuse facility that provides interpretation, and no AA meetings in Burmese in the US. There is a higher rate of substance abuse within the Burmese community, but there's no support. There is a Burmese AA group in Burma, but with the military coup, we were worried that that would be quite triggering, hearing stories of what is happening while people are here and they were refugees. Limited English language skills. If you've ever called the doctor's office and you've gotten a phone tree, right there stops our clients from getting services. If you don't know what button to hit to ask for an interpreter, you can't get services. I had a provider tell me that they were not going to reschedule this client because he did not show up because they called him in English to do a reminder, and the person who answered the phone sounded like they were like a child. I deciphered it was not a child, it was the roommate who also had lower English level. And I asked the provider, would you let a child, your child, take your reminder for your doctor's appointment and make sure you got it? So making sure we're providing those linguistically appropriate services so they can get to the appointments. Also misunderstanding who's providing services. This client was involved with a couple of different hospital, community mental health organization, and someone called him and asked him if he was suicidal, having ideations, and he was like, yeah, I told them I was. And I was like, who called you? He's like, I don't know. So making sure they understand who they're calling and why they're calling and what's the reason, and because they may not have this background of understanding how the health systems work in the U.S. Transportation, physical health issues, financial issues, having high invoices from previous hospital visits, not wanting to go back even if it's necessary for fear of getting high bills. Discomfort, lack of experience in serving the population. We find that with a lot of providers. And just trauma-informed services, understanding that underneath this substance abuse, this client left war. This client has so many things that they have not processed, and giving them the opportunity to do that. Next slide, please. So interventions. This client was connected with a substance abuse therapist and kind of fell through the cracks. I know it's really hard. There's high demand, but off and on with services. And when there was change talk, we weren't able to get him connected to that substance abuse therapist. Connecting a single male with no children to case management support has been really difficult, trying to find that, so running into barriers. Personally seeing this client using motivational interviewing, EMDR and CBT. We have found linguistically appropriate detox groups are really hard with clients if they don't speak English, but only a detox center, not that long-term rehabilitation center, which would be helpful. Education on navigating the health system. What is the difference between Medicaid and private insurance? How does that work? What do you have to pay to take that fear down? And then limited case management within Exodus. Next slide. So this client has, for self-sufficiency, now has stable housing, had lost their housing due to their substance use. We've helped them apply to government benefits. They're being connected with a community partner that wants to find a path, wants to help us connect and make it easier for clients to get there so they're not hitting so many barriers. He's currently employed. He manages all of his appointments. If it's written down, if it's not just a phone call, he can remember them. And then he advocates for himself. He's probably one of the clients who advocates the most for himself. If the interpreter does not speak exactly how he's saying, he understands enough English to say, that's not what I said. They're not saying everything. So he wants to be heard. And when I asked him if I could share his information, he was like, please share everything. I want to help others. I want people to be able to get the services they need. Next slide, please. So I tell you this because this is your call to action. You're hearing stories, some things we've been able to help clients overcome, but we can't do it alone. We need the help of the community. We need the help of DMHA and everyone involved to get our clients, Exodus clients, refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers culturally and linguistically appropriate services. Next slide, please.
So just some different ways. I know we all talked about barriers within the different case studies, but some ways for us to collaborate and break down some of these barriers. Contacting Exodus for staff trainings. So like I mentioned, I am a mental health first aid instructor. But we also provide, we can help provide linguistically appropriate services for you, so we can kind of help guide you through that process. We also just do provide we have different speaking engagements and different opportunities. Also on our website, we do have different volunteer opportunities. So we have youth mentors, family mentors, conversation partners, things like that. Hoping that as a result of this conference and some of the different discussions that we have had, that you can take what we've learned and be an advocate within your organization. Also, just taking the time to learn about how to access interpreters, and then also best practices when using interpreters. So if your agency receives federal funds, then you're actually required to provide linguistically appropriate services. So just ensuring that you're following up and that clients are receiving those services. And then also when working with an interpreter, making sure that you are, well, let's use this example. Can you remember anything, or can you remember what was talked about for these last 5 minutes? And now imagine trying to interpret all of those details and then relay that onto the client. So really taking that time when you are working with an interpreter to break things down and not overwhelming the interpreter so that things don't get lost in translation. Right, next slide, please. And then we also just included some resources on the PowerPoint and the PDF that you guys should all have access to. Some more information on our website, UNHCR's website, CWS's website, who is our national affiliate, and then also a cultural backgrounder. It's just a good website that offers a plethora of information just regarding different backgrounds and different cultures that we serve, just some basic information that can help with that cultural competency piece. From references from today, next slide. So we wanted to make sure that we allowed, I know we had a lot of information in there, but we wanted to make sure that we still allowed some time for questions. So we'll go ahead and open it up at this point.
Claire, Craig, Danielle, thank you so much. It's such poignant stories of the clients that you serve. It really took us to walk that journey with them. So thank you for starting off right off the bat with setting really the tone of the traumas and the hardships and the level of difficulty that your clients have already faced before even beginning or attempting to navigate the healthcare system and mental health systems within the state. You know, for those that are taking a moment to bring questions forth to our wonderful speakers today, I want to just tie their great presentation back to our track of organizational adaptability today, and essentially give some insights into the fact that Exodus Refugee is really rapid change managers. When we look at the organizational level work that they're doing, they're looking at it not just from a systems level, but from a country level, and how those refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers are then having to be supported through not only the interpretation work, but also the cultural understanding of how our systems work. Not only why do they work that way, but how they work in any ability to then relate that back to, so then how do I even begin to seek care? So when we look at this, I'm really going to attach the moniker of our Exodus Refugee team is not only cultural translators, but they are truly systems navigators of what our processes are today, how they should be improved and can be improved for individuals that, because of limited English proficiency and lack of understanding of how the US systems and frameworks work, really are navigating totally blind within our environments. So with that said, I'm going to turn to a couple questions that have been brought forth from the team. The first one is, recently we celebrated Cinco de Mayo, the Mexican Independence Day, and there was a wonderful NPR podcast about why the United States, or perhaps certain components of the states of the United States, are not recognizing individuals from Mexico escaping from cartels as being defined as refugees. Has Exodus Refugee Immigration supported Mexican refugee and asylum seekers in the state of Indiana?
So I can talk to that a bit. So if someone from Mexico comes in and is seeking asylum, and they have made it through detention and they come and they're in Indiana, they can contact Exodus, and we are able to provide services if their case is deemed to be a viable case. If not, there are other organizations that help them. And if they are an asylum seeker, they are able to receive English classes, mental health classes. We have a asylum seeker program, one of, I think, the only ones in Indiana, an asylum seeker program that they can enroll in that helps educate them on some case management, provides some information. We don't provide funding to them, but we can help them understand, okay, here is a food bank. Here's other organizations that you can connect with. Here's ways that you can connect with the community. So we don't, at the national level, try and advocate on changing the policy. That's not what we do, but we do, if someone comes in and they are seeking asylum and they have a case, we are able to provide and support them.
Excellent, thank you so much. It was very clear on the navigation of not only the steps, but the role of Exodus Refugee. When we look at the context of earlier today's conversation regarding retention and recruitment and some of the ways that we are really looking at organizational adaptability in supporting our future workforce, what are some of the recruitment methods that you are using to outreach to folks that are passionate about working with refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers, and ultimately, what is kind of your vision of what that future workforce looks like?
So I can start off, and so we are going into the community. So we talk at universities and talk to mental master's level clinicians and kind of get in there proactive and explain what it is to provide culturally and linguistically appropriate services, because we understand that they are going to graduate, they're going to be in the community mental health, they're going to be in other organizations. So helping to spread the word and starting before they're even in the organizations as well. And we do have a large volunteer program. And with the volunteer and also a co-sponsorship, which is something that was just started with the Afghan placement program, where volunteers can help in many different ways and help with mentorship for the youth program. For example, we have conversation partners for different languages if people are looking for just a conversation or someone to help support them get around. So it's helping to feed in and build that within the community and help people understand how to work with clients. And then we also partner with Waco Family Services, who provides counseling services in Swahili. So finding others in the community where we can connect with, and then also hopefully feed in and draw from their expertise on having Swahili speaking counselors and bring that together.
The only other thing I was going to add is we do have an internship program too. So working on as you heard in Craig's bio too, he was actually an intern prior to working at Exodus. And then that's another unique thing about our agency is we do have a handful of coworkers that came here as refugees or had different immigration status. And as they've become self-sufficient and kind of integrated in the community, they now work for us as case managers, employment specialists, different things like that.
Thank you, Danielle and Claire. Craig, any additional insights?
I think the only thing that I would add, right, when it comes to retention of staff and building a team, we look at this as we try to approach it in two ways. But building relationships, we don't want to make it a transactional thing. We want them to be actual relationships. And our team sometimes doesn't have to be working for Exodus, but it's individuals that are working in the community that we know we can really lean on, especially in the mental wellness program, where if we need to refer someone outside, we're confident in where we're referring them to. And then we're also expanding. We just recently opened another office in Bloomington, Indiana, and that a shameless plug I'll put in. We're constantly hiring. So if anyone is interested, I think any of us would definitely be happy to chat with you about the work that we do and some of the avenues you can really become involved. And again, just offering some of those growth opportunities, like you heard Claire saying, that we're all trained mental health first aiders, national trainers, and just giving that empowerment to individuals that are serving on our staff to be able to really be in the work in the community and contributing meaningfully.
Craig, plug away, wonderful, and congratulations to you all to another site in Bloomington, much needed. I'm going to bring the screen back to your call to action because it's a wonderful and beautiful segue to the closure to our conference for our 2022 Practice Policy and Innovation for Mental Health and Addictions Providers. Your call to action is, what can you do as mental health and addictions providers to provide culturally and linguistically appropriate services to refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers in our community? Well, it just so happens that the national class is a definitive framework for not how only we do our work, but how we do our work and the approaches that we take to ensure that we're providing equitable services and service excellence to our patients across the state. So as we leave this conference today, not only with Exodus Refugee Immigration's excellent call to action, I'm going to expand upon that to add another call to action and remind us all from our Chief of Staff, Rachel Johnson Yates, call to action of what will you intentionally do in the next 30 days to account for decision-based intentional change in your pursuit of individual accountability in our transformation of the mental health system in the state. And then further, how will that change your organization through your influence and impact 6 months from now? How do we viscerally visualize that? And how do we identify through that our own support and our own structure of belonging that we take from ourselves and provide that to our peers, to our coworkers, to our patients, and then ultimately continue to improve upon our employers, our organizational structures, and ultimately impacting the system at large. It has been my honor to preside as the MC for the conference for 2022. We will be providing post-production in 2 weeks. The CEU for the Exodus Refugee Immigration team will be coming forth at the end of this session. And we encourage you to share the webinars and post-production videos and the presentations that will be coming into your inboxes in 2 weeks with your colleagues and others that can continue to spread the message and continue to build capacity, competencies, and overall capabilities in our systems of care. Everyone, I wish you well, good self-care, and good overall supportive organizations as we continue to build out what the vision and future of mental health and addictions looks like within the state of Indiana. And this will conclude our session and our conference. Take care, everyone.